was a man, he was begging and pleading, and I told him he could have a half hour to pray to God. And if God could come down and change the circumstances, he'd have that time. But God never showed up. And that was that.
Welcome to Very Scary People. I'm Donnie Wahlberg. Mafia hitman and serial killer Richard Kuklinski got away with murder for years. He used guns, cyanide, even tire irons to execute his victims, then skillfully covered his trail. But after he took out 2 of his crime ring cronies, he was on investigators' radar. Now, Kuklinski and an undercover agent were about to face off. Could the investigator manipulate the notoriously secretive killer to talk about his crimes? Here is part 2 of The Iceman.
I beat a guy to death one time. I had blood in my shoes. His blood in my shoes. It just goes on that way. Had to throw all my clothes away.
His name was Richard Kuklinski, also known as the Iceman.
Richard Kuklinski, allegedly killed for profit, coldly and without remorse.
Shot a guy one time in his Adam's apple. See how long it would take him to die.
Richard Kuklinski was a mafia contract killer, but he was also a freelance killer.
After making contact with somebody, he would lure them into thinking that he was able to provide a quantity of something that that person was looking for. And he was not going to just rob them, he was going to kill them.
In 1983, the authorities found a body wrapped up in Orangetown, New York. This turned out to be Louis Masgay.
He was brought to the medical examiner's office and examined. He had the same clothes on that he disappeared in 2 years prior. Even more interesting is they found what they termed as ice crystal artifacts,
Which indicated that he, in fact, had been frozen.
In the hope that the time of death would be not known.
That particular crime was the genesis of the name Iceman. We knew we were looking for somebody that had literally frozen a person.
Kuklinski was also working with a small crime ring. Kuklinski knew that they posed a real threat to him.
And he got rid of them, one by one.
Kuklinski had mixed cyanide in the ketchup that was then brought on a hamburger.
At least 5 killings between 1980 and 1983 with handguns and cyanide.
Richard Kuklinski was a very low-key individual. He was secretive. He looked to be living a normal suburban life. He married Barbara, and they had 3 children, 2 girls and a boy.
His wife, Barbara, told me she really didn't know too much about what he did.
You have said of Richard, there are 2 Richards. I never knew who'd be walking in the door. He could be generous to a fault or the meanest man on earth. Tell us more about that.
That's true. He was kind, considerate. He would have done anything for all of us. Very generous gifts and flowers and the best dinners and nice wine. But when whatever twisted him, whatever happened, it didn't matter how good those times were, because the bad was so bad.
And he abused you physically?
He certainly did.
What did he do?
Stabbed me, broke my nose.
He had said that if he ever went too far with Mom,
killed her.
Right, that I would have to understand that he would have to take care, get rid of all of us, because he could leave no witnesses, and that it would be hardest.
He'd have to kill you?
They planned to poison him, Barbara and Chris. But they realized that if they tried to do that and it didn't work, that he would kill them.
This guy was a walking time bomb. You don't listen to him, you die. He feels you betrayed him, you die. You say anything bad about the family, you die. That's his world.
Richard Kuklinski claimed to have killed 100, 200 people. We simply have no idea.
He wasn't the toughest guy on the block. He was the most dangerous animal in the jungle.
We had acquired a lot of information through various law enforcement sources which pointed to Richard Kuklinski. The problem with it was there wasn't enough information to arrest him.
The idea that was suggested was we could have an undercover pose as another criminal. I used the name of Dominic Michael Provenzano. After 18 months in there, I first met Kuklinski. He goes, I hear you have a lot of connections. Can you get pure cyanide? Everybody's sitting at this long table, and my pager goes off.
This untouchable serial murderer was now seeking Dominic out. Dom was no longer hunting Kuklinski. Kuklinski was hunting Dom. Everyone is excited for Dom to call back.
One guy says, get a tape, I want it recorded, I want this done now. And I said, I'm not doing that. I'm gonna tell you why. Everybody that he dealt with jumped. I'm not jumping for him. He came to me. He reached out to me.
Gangsters are not prompt. One of the simplest ways to identify an undercover cop, if he's always prompt, if he's always on time. You know who does that? Cops do that.
I waited a day to give him a call back. So what happened is, the following day, we started talking.
You know, they got the coke, but the cyanide, I mean, you know, you gotta be careful, because, you know, I don't know how you want to use it, but it's your business, you know?
They began talking about doing crimes together, and they began talking about different things.
I don't intend to resell it to anybody. I'm intending to use it myself. Yeah, well, don't you take it. No, I don't intend. You know, I just have a few problems I want to dispose of. I have some rats I want to get rid of. Yeah. The only thing I don't understand, don't you use a piece of iron to get rid of these people? Use this cyanide? Why be messy? You can do it nice and calm.
So during this conversation, when Dom references his use of iron, he opens the door for Kuklinski to brag on his technique.
And you mean to tell me your way is nice and clean and nothing shows up? Well, it may show, my friend, but it's quiet. It's not messy. You know, there's even spray mists around, you know. Yeah? Yeah, you put that stuff in a mist, you spray it in somebody's face, and they go to sleep. Fast, or how long does it take? About that fast. I mean, I'm not adverse to little lead, I'm not adverse to steel, I'm not adverse to, you know, whatever. As long as he's dead, that's the bottom line. Well, that's the thing, isn't it? Your way sounds like a James Bond movie, but if it's realistic that way, I mean, I've done it all ways. As far as you've known or heard, there isn't too many things I haven't tried. It sounds interesting. We gotta go for coffee, break bread over this thing. It sounds good. Sounds much easier. You know, there's more than one way to skin something. Yeah, I hear you. It all depends on how determined you are to get it done.
Dominic Polifrone told Kuklinski that he was interested in purchasing weapons. And in fact, he was looking for a hit kit. Hit kit is a .22 with a silencer on it. Kuklinski told him, yes, I can deliver that to you, but I'm looking for a cyanide.
They said, you're gonna give me an assassination kit and I'm gonna pay you $1,100. After you do that, you come and see me, now we'll talk business for your pure cyanide.
It was like the ultimate chess game. You gotta make a move and hope it's not the wrong move.
Did you ever murder anyone you liked?
All my friends did. At one point in time, I'm sure I liked them.
In the 1980s, Richard Kuklinski met a fellow named Robert Prongay.
He was also a hitman, it appears, and so they had a lot in common.
Prongay was a self-taught chemist, and he had an adjacent garage to Kuklinski's,
where Richard Kuklinski killed several individuals.
Interestingly to me, Prongay ran a Mr. Softy truck, and Kuklinski used to call him Mr. Softy.
He sold ice cream to the kids in the neighborhood.
He'd go into these neighborhoods and sell ice cream to the kids and maybe kill one of their fathers.
Robert Prongay killed in different ways. I heard a story once where he liked explosives and he developed a method to put it in a remote control car, and he drove that under another car of a target and he exploded it.
Now, Robert taught Richard some sophisticated ways of killing, including cyanide.
He showed him how he could put it in a liquid and put it in a drink. He taught him how you could put it on gravy. You could also put it in a spray mist.
And Mr. Softy helped him obtain some of the cyanide he needed for his homicides.
The relationship between Kuklinski and Prongay went swimmingly for a while, but before long, they had a falling out.
Apparently, Kuklinski realized that this guy could be a liability, and I don't need him anymore. He's taught me everything he needed to. He's got to go. And he killed him.
On August 8th, 1984, Robert Prongay's body was found, shot to death in his Mr. Softy truck.
Poor Bobby Prongay, 5 in the chest.
But one negative side effect of Prongay being dead is that Kuklinski no longer has a source for his cyanide, which has become his new passion as a way to kill people. So now he's looking for other ways of acquiring cyanide.
And so I was his man, I was his connection.
After they first met, Dominic Polifrone and Richard Kuklinski had a bunch of different meetups and discussions together about how to carry out their crimes. Dominic wore something called a Nagra. It was a little bulkier than the technology they use today, but a Nagra was state-of-the-art in the time.
It is a reel-to-reel tape recorder about the size of a microwave dinner. So imagine yourself going to meet an organized crime serial killer with this duct taped into the small of your back. The margin of error for Dom was 0. If Richard Kuklinski finds out that Dom is lying to him, deceiving him, tricking him, he's going to drag a straight razor across his throat.
In October, he calls, he says, I have your assassination kit for you. We meet at the Vince Lombardi service station that he suggests. Inside the trunk, a beautiful high standard 22 caliber silencer affixed to the weapon.
You want me to show it to you, or you want to... Let me just look, huh? Huh? Yeah. Just don't use it on me, huh? You just have 3 pieces. You have the clip, the gun, and the silencer.
So I take the gun, and I give him $1,100.
It was a clean criminal deal that just further enhanced Dom's credibility in the eyes of Kuklinski.
And he goes, I can't stay that long. He says, but you have your source for the pure cyanide. I said, absolutely. He says, okay, let's stay in touch.
As the investigation proceeded, we decided to come up with a plan to lure Kuklinski in to kill somebody.
We knew he needed money and he needed cyanide. So it was our idea to join him in a murder plot. And of course, it wasn't really a murder plot.
Dominic proposed to Kuklinski that he had this rich kid that was wealthy and always had a lot of money on him that he was dealing drugs with and he wanted to get rid of.
I got this rich Jewish kid, all right? He's flying with a lot of coke. Get him off my back, but I want him gone. You think we can dupe up the coke? Definitely. I think it'd be a quick score if you want. If he's all alone? Yeah. He comes all alone all the time. And he's got the shit? Yeah.
When Dom talks to Kuklinski about the fake murder, what he's doing is opening the door for Kuklinski to talk about his own assassinations and murders.
More than one way to do it. Okay, I want to look like a cokehead. Want to OD. That's exactly what I want. Well, we can always give him some pure shit and make him OD. I want it to look like with the cyanide shit. The squirt, whatever the you're gonna do. Well, how are we gonna do it? You tell me.
Over time, as he began to trust Dom, he then made some very incriminating statements.
He told me how he killed people with firearms and with knives, and sometimes chainsaws. He had to cut the limbs to get them in the barrel.
I don't have a problem with it. Myself, what's the problem?
One of the conversations, Kuklinski went into detail on how you can throw law enforcement off by killing somebody, freezing the body, and then disposing of it a couple years later.
He told me that he murdered an individual, that he froze the body for 2 years, and he made the cops look like jerks. I said, what do you mean?
The coroner said he was dead 2 weeks. In actuality, he was dead 2.5 years. Yeah, but wait a minute, what about the body stuff you teach? That's changed. The freeze and maintain everything. You mean to tell me this guy was dead for 2 years and his features and everything was the same? Absolutely, that's right. He had the same pair of pants on, same shoes, same shirt, same sweater. Everything was the same.
Kuklinski is now bragging on the murders he's done. He's letting his guard down.
He said, when you do something like this, use Glad bags. He says they last a couple of years. This is his sense of humor.
He talked about slipping cyanide into someone's hamburgers.
Hi guys, tell me go give me a hamburger. Put in the hamburger with the ketchup. Don't blend in. I don't have enough to have a fine appetite.
Not only is he not shying away from it, he's bragging on it.
I had one guy who was watching, I couldn't believe it. He almost consumed the whole movie for him. Must have had a constitutional control. Well, I hate the whole burger. Yeah. I stood there and said, what did I do wrong?
Richie's telling me, he says, we're laughing at him, get one of the lamp cords, strangle him, and then we throw him under the bed. And then we leave him there, and off we go.
Each time he offers a detail, it's back-checked against the real murder, and all of them dovetail.
At a certain point in time, it was believed that Richard Kuklinski could tell Dominic just about anything he wanted because he had plans to kill him and take all the money.
He who hesitates is lost, my friend. You're right.
I always kept that in my mind. He who hesitates lost. I got it right at the top of my head.
Did you think of yourself as an assassin?
Assassin? Sounds so exotic. I was just a murderer.
Dominic Polifrone was undercover for months.
4 months that I was able to extract the information, all his conversations then on tape.
So after Polifrone had established with these audio recordings that showed that Kuklinski admitting to committing murders, he helped set up the fake hit. And this would be the final proof that was needed to put Kuklinski behind bars.
They were fully engaged in Dom's plan to murder the rich kid under the ruse of a cocaine deal.
A rich kid comes with cash and I give him cocaine. We were gonna get him into the van and Rich was gonna give him the egg sandwiches.
They were going to put cyanide on the one sandwich that the kid was supposed to eat.
And he's going to chop the body and put it into the barrel, and he would dump it somewhere. And we each make $40,000 apiece.
We'll pick up a barrel off this here with a top on it. You're going to make arrangements to steal that, and however you do that? Yeah. All right.
Dom certainly didn't want to give Kuklinski cyanide as an ATF agent who's undercover.
We had a simulated cyanide that smelt like cyanide, that looked like cyanide, that was made up from the lab.
Dom, instead of cyanide, gave quinine. Now, the reason to do that, quinine, if that's administered to somebody, you can then detect that, which would then show that it was given in the attempt to murder somebody. So it was really quite brilliant.
TF 1786. There's a guy about to meet with you. Let's do what you can know that.
Kuklinski and Dominic met up on December 17, 1986 at the Vince Lombardi rest area.
Dom gives Kuklinski the egg sandwiches and what is allegedly a vial of cyanide.
He brought tape with him and rubber gloves that he had, so he was ready for this. Kuklinski then says, listen, my wife wasn't feeling that good, but I'm gonna head home, but I'll be back.
Now, what happened was Kuklinski didn't come back right away. Surveillance indicated he was at his house, and a decision was made down by the upper echelon, just take him down.
And they did.
He was extremely animated, screaming, cursing. I'm gonna kill you, I'm gonna kill your families, he was off the wall.
This is unwarranted, unnecessary. These guys watch too many movies. Never showed a badge, never read me my rights, nothing. They think they're gangbusters, 37 guys to pick up one little guy. It's ridiculous.
Kuklinski was charged with 5 murders. Paul Hoffman, Louis Masgay, Daniel Deppner, Gary Smith, and George Malaband.
At the time of the arrest, the car was searched for any evidence, and in the trunk was found the egg sandwiches. And on the egg sandwiches, 2 of them had the fake cyanide on them. So in fact, not only was the rich kid gonna die, but Dominic was gonna die.
Rich, in your spirit, he who hesitates is lost.
Welcome back to Very Scary People. When investigators finally arrested Richard Kuklinski in 1986, it seemed like the end of the road. But the twists and turns of Iceman's evil legacy were far from over. A search of the home turned up shocking information about one of his killings, and a late-in-life confession uncovers what could yet be another.
Law enforcement authorities have arrested one of the most notorious contract killers in state history. A self-employed Bergen County man is behind bars, charged with 5 murders, and prosecutors are investigating his involvement in dozens more.
On the day of his arrest, his home was searched.
And they found a knife, and it had 8 notches carved into the handle on one side, and I believe 3 on the other side, indicating that he killed 11 people with that knife.
We also talked to an individual by the name of Richard Patterson.
Patterson was engaged to one of Richard's daughters, Merrick.
Richard Patterson opened up another whole door for us in regards to what Richard Kuklinski had done.
One day, Patterson had been sleeping over, and Kuklinski got him up early in the morning and said, listen, I need you to help me move this package, this thing.
And they get in the car and they go. And he says to Richard, jump behind the wheel. He gets out of the car and he goes around the back, he opens the trunk, And Richard looks in the mirror and he sees him taking a body out of the trunk, walking into the woods. And he dumps the body and he gets in. And he tells Richard, what you saw here, you'll never repeat to anyone.
It was ultimately determined that the body was Danny Deppner, who was in Richard's circle of criminal friends. Kuklinski decided Deppner would possibly talk and give him up. He had brought Deppner baked beans and some other food, and Danny Deppner ate the baked beans, and they were loaded with cyanide. He was wrapped in plastic garbage bags, and he was taken up to West Milford, where the body was dumped in the woods. His body was not found until approximately 5 months later. An autopsy showed that he had an undigested amount of baked beans in his stomach.
They found these baked beans that were so intact they could tell they were even burned a little bit. That indicated that the person was eating when they had died.
The path that led to Kuklinski becoming a killer likely began in his childhood. Richard had a very difficult upbringing. His father, according to Richard, was physically abusive, beat him, beat other members of the family. When you have violence in the home, it can create the dynamics that can lead to violent behavior.
By the time he was 10 years old, he had a host of personality problems. He turned his rage on animals early on, started beating dogs to death, setting cats on fire.
Richard Kuklinski was raised in a hardscrabble section of Jersey City. He was of mixed ethnic descent. He was part Polish, part Irish, and because of that, he later said that he was often picked on and taken advantage of.
Ultimately, he says, leading to the murder of a neighborhood bully when he was a teenager.
Richard was about 13 years of age, and he got sick and tired of being bullied. He picked out the big bully. His name was Charlie Lane.
Finally, he's not taking shit no more from the guy and did what he had to do.
And he went into one of the closets in his apartment, and he took all the clothes off the rod.
And he says he waited outside for the boy to come by.
And then he beat him to death with that rod.
After he killed Charlie Lane, Richard was worried that he would get caught. When he didn't, he learned that he might be able to get away with other acts of violence.
After that, if he was humiliated, he would respond with savage violence.
He learned clearly then that violence was the solution to his problem.
I was no longer taking the beating. I was giving it. And that's when I learned that it was better to give than to receive.
Rip me apart like I'm some sort of fool. Never resisted.
The first time that Kuklinski was brought into the courtroom, he had an aura about him, a threatening aura.
He had them damn orange-tinged glasses on. And I'm saying, Jesus, how can they let this guy have these glasses? You know, get him a different pair.
Kuklinski's trial started on January 25th, 1988.
The prosecution began with the murders of Gary Smith and Danny Deppner.
They were the two best cases we had. Out of all five, we had so much.
We tried the Smith and Deppner cases over several weeks.
There was a lot of physical evidence, a lot of testimony from medical examiners about how these people had died.
One of the witnesses was Gary Smith's wife. She testified that her husband left the hotel where Richard was having them stay.
When Gary came home, she said, "Don't go back, you know, don't go back." And he said, "I have to. He'll kill the whole family if I don't."
He goes back and Richie kills him. In court, Kuklinski himself continued with his continence of intimidation, would yell out every now and then at people on the stand.
When witnesses testified against him, he would mouth, "You're dead," or he would go like this to scratch his head, and he'd go like this with it and make it like a gun pointing at him.
I think that the key evidence was Dominic Polifrone's testimony. It laid out who Kuklinski was. It laid out what he did. It laid out the way he carried out his crimes.
The chief attorney's asking me questions, and then they played a tape.
I mean, I'm not adverse to little leg, I'm not adverse to steel, I'm not adverse to, you know, whatever.
You can hear a pin drop, and then I can see some of the faces were like this is hard to believe. Is this reality?
The talk about cyanide and how to kill with cyanide must have sent chills through some of the people on the jury.
You sprinkle a hamburger like that, just totally. That's enough. That's enough to take him and 4 or 5 other guys out.
The tapes killed him. The tapes were devastating. Devastating.
It gave the jurors a very clear picture of what kind of guy he was.
There's even spray mist around, you know. Yeah? Yeah, you put that stuff in a mist, you spray it in somebody's face, and they go to sleep.
All up until the time that Dominic took the stand, Kuklinski's wife and his daughters were in court. You could see his wife and his daughters were disbelieving. They just couldn't believe that he had done these type of things.
But when they heard their husband and father's voice explaining how to kill people and how cold and calculated he was, I think that really hit home with them, and their whole demeanor changed.
We played one of the most explosive tapes early on, and we took a break after that. And I looked over, and Barbara and the daughters, and they were all crying. And she said, "We didn't know. We didn't know."
Through all of that time, all of these dozens and dozens, and maybe as many as 200 murders, Barbara, you didn't know that anything was up. You lived with this man for 25 years, you knew nothing?
No. First of all, you never questioned Richard.
You have said in the past that he would sometimes, he would get up 2 o'clock in the morning, leave the house.
In the middle of dinner and leave the house, and you'd never ask him why.
Barbara was battered and beaten by him. She was not in a position to ever question him about where he was going and where he was coming back. And he was extremely macho. So she was really put upon, actually, as were her children.
Barbara, do you think he could have killed 200 people?
I think he was capable of anything.
To the jury, it was overwhelming evidence. And Richard Kuklinski was convicted of the murder of Gary T. Smith and Daniel Deppner.
This is what the judge said. He said, "Words are inadequate to describe the depths of depravity reached by this defendant. The lives of others have no meaning to this man. No remorse, no conscience, no regrets. Cold, calculated, premeditated murders."
After being convicted of 2 murders, he confessed to 2 others in court today.
Richard Kuklinski later pled guilty to the Malaban and Masgay murders.
I shot George Malaban 5 times.
The judge says to Kuklinski, "Can you tell me why?" And he says,
It was due to business.
When they got him on the other murders, that was it. They had effectively thrown away the key.
He received 4 consecutive life sentences. He was going away for a long, long time. He wasn't getting out.
And so it seemed to bring to an end the long pursuit of the so-called Iceman.
Richard had an unusual reaction to Dominic. He, I think in his own sick way, respected Dominic because Dominic was able to get over on him, just like he got over on so many other people.
Today in court, the Iceman greeted the agent with a smiling, "Hello, Dominic." He seemed to be quite cheery about saying hello to you.
Well, I reciprocated. The only thing is, I'm going home, and he's going to a different environment at the present time.
After Kuklinski was sentenced to New Jersey State Prison, we got a Christmas card from him, which was a very sick, odd number of drawings with Jesus and the devil and skulls, and it was just bizarre. And that was Kuklinski sending us a message, Merry Christmas.
After Kuklinski was convicted and received life without parole sentences for all of those murders, there was no chance he was ever getting out of prison. And he agreed to sit down for a series of interviews with HBO.
He intended to shoot people up close and personal.
Definitely. I wanted to tell them just before they left. I wanted to say goodbye.
Did you like to look them in the eye?
I wanted them looking straight at me.
He spoke about his life. He talked about the murders that he committed. He talked about his mindset and when he committed these murders.
What did you want him to think as they died?
Just see my pretty face. I take it to them. But the last thing they ever saw was me. And if they carry that glimpse to eternity, infinity, or whatever it is, they're going to be thinking of me all that time.
The career hitman's confessions are a stunner. The Iceman saying one of his many victims was a New York City police detective.
One of the killings that Kuklinski claimed to have committed was that of a New York City detective named Peter Calabro in 1980.
There was a snowstorm on that day. Calabro was coming down a road in Saddle River, New Jersey, and Kuklinski knew the route he was going to take, and he blocked the road off with a van. So Calabro would have to slow down and go slowly around the van.
I go to the back of the van, and I go out the back door. I take the shotgun with me, and as he's going by the van, I fired.
Kuklinski stepped out with a shotgun and shotgunned him to death.
The so-called Iceman has nothing to lose. Today, more than 20 years after the crime, he pled guilty to the cold-blooded murder of a New York City police officer.
Did you cause his death?
Yes.
And how did you do that?
I shot him with a shotgun.
Prosecutors are asking for another 30-year prison sentence in the Calabro case. The Iceman is 67 years old now. He actually laughed out loud when the judge said there would be no need to set bail.
When the police came to interview him about his statement that he was involved in the killing of Peter Calabro, Richard said he was hired by Sammy the Bull Gravano, who was associated with the Gambino family.
Now, it's not clear whether Sammy the Bull was involved. He has denied it. There are other theories about what exactly happened there and who was responsible, but it led to Gravano being indicted.
And Kuklinski was ready to testify against him. But then Kuklinski dies, all of a sudden. Amazing.
Richard Kuklinski died March 5th in 2006 of a heart attack.
Allegations are maybe he was poisoned. We'll pay back some bitch if he was.
So without his testimony, the state does not have a good case against him, and the charges against Sammy were dropped.
I don't believe that Richard Kuklinski was involved in the killing of Peter Calabro.
Bullshit. There might have been other agendas that Kuklinski was serving at the time. because the person he said he committed the crime with was then a major witness in a federal case. And if Kuklinski had been believed, then that would have affected his credibility.
We know that for sure he killed 5 people. We also assume that he was involved in numerous other homicides.
Was it possible it could have happened? Absolutely. He's capable of doing things like that.
What a vicious, bloodthirsty, non-caring, apathetic person he was. Cold-blooded killer. Richard Kuklinski was an evil person. Evil to the core. He did what he wanted, when he wanted, to whomever he wanted. Period. End of story.
He met his maker, and I hope it's the devil.
Is that all you've got left is hate?
That's all I've got left. Everything that I ever cared for is gone. Everything I ever liked is gone. Everything that meant anything to me is gone. So hate.
That's all you started with, too.
Then I've come full circle. It's time for me to die.
Richard Kuklinski made many dubious claims to famous mob-related killings, including the death of Jimmy Hoffa. But without definitive proof, we may never know. Kuklinski's wife, Barbara, said that neither his imprisonment nor his death relieved the ongoing terror she felt as a result of being married to him, saying he still haunted her in her dreams. I'm Donnie Wahlberg. Thanks for watching. Good night.